So the kid at the center of the MAGA hat controversy has spoken.
As far as standing there, I had every right to do so. In hindsight, I wish we could have walked away.
Tough spot for all involved. The president used the situation, however, to his advantage, tweeting, "Nick Sandmann and the students of Covington have become symbols of fake news and how evil it can be." The president chose to take sides, to divide. The question for him is why? And the bigger question is what needs to happen here? Let's debate Angela Rye and André Bauer. It's good to have you on the show, André, first time. Angela, always a
Thanks,
pleasure.
Chris.
Angela, how do you see what matters here?
Well, there are a number of sides to every story. People say there are two sides and then there's the truth. And I think that this is so much deeper than that. We're, of course, just on the other side of celebrating Dr. King's holiday. And it's so unfortunate that in 2019, this country couldn't be more divided. I have to tell you that there are a number of us that when we see what happened, some deem it as an altercation, some deem it as a standoff. I see this hat. Right, Chris? And this hat represents so much more to me than just a symbol of free speech to the wearer. This is a hat that represents the man who announced his campaign as, you know, with Mexicans being drug dealers and rapists and let's build this wall. This is a man whose hat represents the same person who said he would pay the legal fees of someone who punched a black protester in the face at one of his rallies. Someone who has trafficked in racism, I would say is racist and definitely spews racist rhetoric. It is hard to divorce his policies, the rhetoric, the propaganda, his supporters from these actions. And unfortunately, these young men who perhaps one day will regret their actions. It sounds like the main one who was standing right in the face of the Native American leader is already regretting some of those actions. And unfortunately, it represents so much of what we've seen, not just in 2019, 2018, 2017, 2016, but what we've seen in this country from its founding.
André.
Well, Chris, like any story, depending on who's narrating it, depends on whose side you would take. I will say, as a different perspective, Nathan Phillips, I think, probably diffused this situation, which could have gotten to a much more difficult situation where it could have been a physical altercation. I don't understand why the parents or the teachers didn't remove these students immediately. Had I been there and those had been my children, I would have immediately moved them from what I think was a hostile situation that could have escalated quite quickly. And after looking at the tape, to me, seems like, well, Nathan Phillips may have gotten a little too close to the children. The children should have backed off as well. At the end of the day, he did get between the two of them, and I actually think that could have very well saved what would have been a much bigger and unfortunate situation.
Yeah, by all accounts, people were going after Phillips and saying he changed his story, whatever. What he perceived in terms of what this could mean for him, you have to separate from what actions he took. And yes, he walked up to the kids. I agree with what you're saying there. By most accounts, André, they were trying to defuse. And look, there was no violence, thank God. There was not anything more ugly than what we get to see in this video. So take that as a win in an area of lots of losses. But Angela, then we have this. The president comes out and speaks on this. Not Steve King, not Steve King. Won't say anything about Steve King's message. Nothing. Even on MLK weekend, nothing. But he does come out and say this, clearly takes a side, takes a shot at the media and something more. You think it's just him defending his hat? What does this mean to you?
No, it's so interesting, Chris, right? Like we think about the time when Barack Obama was criticized so heavily for the beer summit between the police officer and Henry Louis Gates, who we know is a legend and was in his own home, right? A beer summit just to bring two sides together. And once again, this president is demonizing one side, and really not one side. He's demonizing the media, which of course we know is his favorite enemy to pick on, and then also taking the side against this Native American. We have to remember what was actually happening at that time, and that was an Indigenous Peoples March. That has somehow been forgotten in all of this. He had every right to be there too. He had every right to stand his ground. I should probably pick another term. We know what that means nowadays. But at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, it's so interesting that instead of using this platform as commander-in-chief to bring people together, to figure out how to end some of this rhetoric, some of these challenges, some of the greatest conflict of our time, he's again choosing sides and doubling down on some of the, again, the most hateful rhetoric, bigotry, xenophobia that we've seen in years.
Why jump on this, André? Why try to bring these kids to the White House? The facts are unclear about whether they were invited, maybe after the shutdown, whatever it is. Why jump on this and ignore Steve King?
Well, first off, Angela and I are good friends, and I find myself usually on the other side, but I agree with her. I think the president missed what would have been a better opportunity to take the high ground for both sides and say, look, you know, we need to come together on such a special occasion like Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday and day. We should have, in fact, found the high ground for both sides. Unfortunately, nothing happened, but we need to be kinder to one another. And so I think it was a missed opportunity.
Why does he never
But I think
do
that
that?
he
Didn't know how.
I think the president continues to feel like, as so many Republicans do, the media overwhelmingly tends to favor the other side, and he continues to feel like it's a beatdown every day in the media, just as he was falsely accused just a few short days before that. And so I think he felt much like these young people had been treated
Falsely accused of what?
unfortunately the same way, and I think he took their side.
What was he falsely accused of?
He was falsely accused of talking to the other side. The media immediately jumped on an untrue story, and then every pundit out there immediately said, "Oh well, immediately he needs to be impeached." When in fact we know that wasn't.
Or you're talking about the
case at
BuzzFeed
all.
story, and that's
Yeah, I think
was
that
on the president's
feeds-
mind. So when this happened, he decided to take a situation as volatile as this and play to advantage because he was upset about the BuzzFeed story.
Well, Chris, I think it's a continual that he sees so much media coverage that's not true and unfair towards him. And so when he sees this happen to other people, he understands what they're dealing with when immediately these people are accused of something.
I
that,
hear
quite
the argument.
frankly,
It's just so
probably
hard
didn't
to
happen.
accept, Angela, because I've never
extremely hard to
seen a
accept.
man in elected office, let alone the presidency, dissemble, divide, misstate, and lie as often as this president has. So the idea that he's offended by things that aren't accurate, it's a little hard to believe.
Well, and not only is it hard to believe, it's hard to accept. I wish that for one moment, right, we can talk about what we see, because people are talking about, well, you know, what is happening right now as a result of what happened in this particular incident is our varying perspectives. And I think that's such a powerful point. Like, forget Donald Trump for a moment and just think about the symbol of that red hat. When I see the Make America Great Again hat now, Chris, I am triggered. I'm so triggered. Andre, I think in a lot of ways our friendship has been compromised by the fact that you continue to support this man. The one thing I will say to you, to be absolutely fair, is more than anybody else that I know on this network, you will regularly take Donald Trump to task. I don't agree with you on this last point, but this Make America Great Again hat is just as maddening and frustrating and triggering for me to look at as a KKK hood. Like, that is the type of hatred
I would tell you
that
this.
his policies represent. And until we can have common ground and understanding about that, that it's that triggering, we're going to continue to have problems.
Final word, Andre.
Then I would just say, you don't let people run around in your head rent-free. There are things that offend me, but I don't let them offend me. A lot of people take that red hat that they believe we elected an individual that was willing to take on everybody from Wall Street to the media to go in and drain the swamp and
To
clean
kids on
Washington
the
out
border.
and put this country back on the path to where we believed America was first, and to make it great again, to where we looked after the people in this country first and foremost. And there's a lot of
When was that?
unheard people
When
in
was that,
America
Andre?
that felt like Donald Trump was the
When was it
vehicle
great,
to make
Andre?
that happen.
Well, look,
When was
that's
it great,
Well,
Andre?
I don't believe that it's not great now, but there have been days
No, but
when
when
we
was it
worried
great
about the
again?
people
Tell
in this
me the
country.
year.
You know,
I think
you
it
know the
continues
problem
to
with
get
this.
better
Yeah, I know.
every day.
Andre's being smart, because anytime you go into
No,
our
I'm not.
past, you would have to be identifying a period where we were not as free and equal as we are today. And that's the problem with something that inherently asks us to look back to an earlier time.
That's
to Angela's
exactly
point
right.
about being sensitive. And look, I was with you. When I first saw the hat, I was like, it's a slogan hat. That's what they are. I understand differently now. I am blessed with enough people in my life who have different experience when it comes to what that hat means to them and how they feel they're represented in that dynamic. I get it. It's not just a hat. It shouldn't be, and that's why we got to know why the kids were wearing it there. But Andre, thank you for making the points. Angela, as always, be well.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you, Chris.